Jen, I would like to maybe talk about. I have a couple of questions, and I guess I would categorize these under the maximizing returns with strategic IT and ERP management. So, given your background with top tier clients, what strategy should growth oriented firms implement for effective IT and ERP management to enhance returns? So I know that's a bit of a general and loaded question, but yeah, given your background, what strategies would you recommend that growth-oriented PE firms should implement for effective IT and ERP management?
Sure. I think of three things. And the first is go vanilla. So that just means simplify your processes. Try to adopt the processes that's already inherently built into a lot of these systems. So ERP, a lot of the other systems and platforms do have a lot of inherent business processes. Try to understand it and just adopt it. That's what I mean by go vanilla. Second thing is build the A team. And I think of a three-legged stool model for ERP as very effective. I've seen that in action, and it's something that I really believe is compelling. Three-legged stool model is have a business leader that's assigned, have an IT leader that's assigned, and then if you're working with a system integrator that can bring in those best practices, the third leg of the stool is a system integrator. Define your work streams as end-to-end. So it's not your functional silos like supply chain versus manufacturing versus IT versus something else, but end to end are things like plan to stock. So if you have a single business leader, it really doesn't matter if that business leader is from manufacturing or supply chain, they should own the entire process end to end from plan to stock, order to cash, hire to retire. So a single business leader, a single IT leader, and a single system integrator leader. Collectively, those three should make the decisions going forward on your business processes, and then any implementation decision that comes up throughout the project as well.
Well, once again, good advice. I really like the go vanilla and simplify processes as much as possible. The idea of having lean and effective processes, but there's a balance there, right? You don't want to have your processes be too lean, but you don't want them to be overly complex and sophisticated. So how does readiness for IT and ERP transformation specifically, Jen, impact the success of firms with a significant focus on portfolio expansion?
Well, I think of this as I was part of the SAP implementation, as I mentioned, that we implemented SAP successfully in 33 months. If you kind of think about the fact that we didn't have to do it, we didn't actually have to implement a brand new ERP system. We wanted to do it in terms of future scaling and future growth. And I think of it also as there's never a good time to do a transformation. As in, we're always super busy. Companies are always acquiring, they're always making things more efficient. They always have digital transformation initiatives. They always will have that. Does the change become slower? Or I'm reminded of this quote that, yes, it's been changing faster and more than ever, but it will never be this slow. So the fact that you have mergers and acquisitions shouldn't actually stop you. It should actually prompt you to really consider how you can embark on the journey of digital transformation to build that foundational infrastructure, whether it's processes or system or data, to enable you to do more in the future with your portfolio. So it is a scary and large initiative. It is multi-year, but if you don't embark on that journey, as I mentioned, the example of the product and part SKUs, it actually will become at a point where it will hinder your business process. The product and part SKUs, as an example, if you don't clean that up front and establish the right master data management around that, it will affect your ability to not only price, but also sell and manufacture your product down the road.
Yeah, and I think, Jen, with some of these questions today, I think maybe a common theme with the line of questions that I have for you is being proactive and deliberate, right? And especially when it comes to readiness for IT and ERP transformations, certainly impacts the success. So, what I mean by that is, readiness to me means understanding the purpose, the mission, the values of the change to begin with, and then having a shared definition of success and then the proper change culture to implement that change. And I think I've heard you in multiple responses here today just talk about the idea of, putting in the time, creating the insurance, let's say, on the front end that can pay dividends down the road in terms of, success. So being prepared and ready right out of the gates saves a lot of time, money, and effort and organizational capital later on in the project.
Yes, absolutely. You summarized it perfectly.
So, could you talk about the role of PMO in driving ERP success and risk mitigation in large scale projects? I know I've asked you a couple of questions somewhat related to this, but what role specifically does the PMO have in driving ERP success and mitigating risk? And then maybe if you can give an example of what risk mitigation might look like.
Yes. So I think one of the largest risks of any large scale initiative like the ERP or any digital transformation is your resource risk. So I actually develop a very simple but effective method to assess the resource impact up front. And what I do with that is imagine a simple grid. You have the months all across the columns, and then the rows are your key resources. You can do those by roles. IT developer, as an example, there might be your architect, there might be QA. Business meets all of the various business areas. Of course, you'll need a project manager or two to enable that. So whatever your roles are, those are the rows on that grid. And then now you're going to start to put in percentages, and you can ramp that up over the months. And then what that will give you at the end of the day, you can add up all those percentages. So 100% is 1 FTE as an example. You could do 5 FTEs, which is 500%. You get the idea. What that will enable you to do is assess what are the in-source impact by months. So a lot of times people don't have that granularity of planning by months, but it is critical to plan by months because you don't want to have a false resource plan where you just say, I need 10 FTEs for the year, when in reality is I need 1 FTE starting in January and then ramps up to 10 FTE by the time it's June, July. Because what that will also allow us to do is to convert the percentages into a blended rate. So let's just say you use a simple blended rate like $100 an hour. Now you can assess apples to apples comparison around this initiative or this part of the project is going to cost X with this number of resources with this type of role against this other project that will cost X with this number of resources and this number of role. It also allows you to sequence the projects potentially. Not everything has to start in January and end in December. You can actually, because of that ramp, sequence those so that you're staggering some starts and staggering some of those projects or resource loads so that you're intentionally balancing that. Those are powerful things that I think the PMO does if it's effective and can drive that across the organization for resource allocation on an organizational level.
Yeah. Jen, that is great. I agree with you. It seems to me that this idea of FTE management and sequencing is a true skill or experience. Well, I should say it's a true skill that experienced PMs and PMOs have. And some do a better job in that area than another. But I could not agree more that it is absolutely critical idea. One of the things you see, Jen, is, you go in and you have these projects and talking about resource risk. PMOs or PMs, they may go into a project and start allocating stakeholders to specific duties and tasks, and you overwhelm them. So they have their day job to do, which is, in some cases 30, 40, 50 hours a week or plus. And then on top of that, you're asking them to be a participant in a pretty substantial organizational change project. I think there's a lot of great literature that speaks to this topic, and there's some various degrees of thoughts on this, but there is multiple pieces of work, peer-reviewed work that says, hey, if you get over that 15 to 20% of a stakeholder's time being engaged in the new large-scale project, in addition to doing their day job, and you don't make any changes to accommodate that, that creates issues, right? Frustrations and burnout and other issues like that I think often PMOs or project managers don't consider as much as they should, again, on the onset of the project.
Yes, absolutely. I think the example that you gave was really hit the nail on the head, which is If you're depending on a resource that already has a day job and you're going to allocate a percentage of their time, and as you said, hopefully it's not more than 10 or 15%, but a lot of times it will become more than that because of that ramp that I just mentioned. The answer and the solution, if we really do an intentional resource plan up front, is to actually backfill those SMEs so that as a ramp occurs, they're backfilled as a higher temporary resource to maintain that operations. So we talked about operational continuity. Well, that's what this is to backfill those resources so they can actually work on the project and not on maintaining their day job. That's actually really key and critical because most of the risk and issues that are raised by project managers on these large scale initiatives is the fact that resources aren't available when they're needed. Well, do we plan for this and do we communicate the plan and make sure that we have either backfills in place or other resources that are available to do this?
Yeah, M&A, mergers and acquisitions, can often be a time of high change, high expectations, frustrations, and often turnover due to uncertainties. And then now on top of that, you're throwing more responsibilities on various stakeholders with your large scale project, whether it's IT or certainly ERP. Great advice. So, Jen, I really appreciate your time. Before I let you go, I do want to ask you two more questions today. And my next question is, what advice would you offer for leveraging technology to drive organizational change and maintain a competitive edge in the market? So just in general, do you have any advice you can offer up on leveraging technology in a way that can give an organization more of a competitive advantage?
Yes. There's lots of PPM tools out there that can drive the visibility into the strategic execution, which are through projects and programs. And I've even implemented a few of those PPM tools myself. But I would say the key here is that any tool is only as good as the data and the process behind it. And so instead of thinking about which tool or technology to leverage up front, it's actually the discipline and culture issue that needs to be addressed first. And then the business process in terms of standardization and alignment. And then ultimately, the technology will support that. And it's a lot easier to select a technology to support a well defined standard business process where the people part of it, because people are needed to input the data that will actually enable the organization to leverage that technology.
Ah, that's great. I say all the time that maintaining transactional discipline. So one thing that's a competitive advantage for sure, regardless of the platform you have, is as you just said, is managing the people and processes in the way that you're using your business intelligence, your business systems. And, I say all the time that if you think about it, ERP transactions for the most part represent dollars, right? So whenever there's a transaction in your logical system, your ERP system, and I'm not saying always, but often that either represents the transfer of a dollar or the transformation of a dollar. And so therefore, you want the time in which you physically move product, let's say from the time you do a receipt to the time you do a shipment and everything in between, that physical representation of your business needs to be timely and accurately recorded in your logical representation of your business. And sometimes that's easier said than done. So this idea that you mentioned, I couldn't agree more, of just making sure you develop the processes. And it's not all about functionality within the system and the technology or the specific tech stack that you're using and that sort of thing, although that's critical, but it's a much bigger thing than that. So I appreciate it.